first question for you. Can you kindly give us an insight into your background and what inspired you to go into the veterinary profession?
Okay. Well, initially, I went into the veterinary profession at the age of 15. So I had an insight doing work experience when I was at high school, where I spent 2 weeks in private practice. Now it's then when I got a bit of a taste of what it was like working in that kind of environment, and that's where the passion develops from there. So from there, I went on to a place called Moscow College. Now, they predominantly did a lot of work with animal care, animal management, and and in that related field. And it was there where I got my animal care certificate and an animal management in a HND, a national diploma. Now, once I've qualified from there, I managed to get a job in private practice in Stockport, which was a first opinion practice. And I was there for about 2 years.
Mm.
So that was back in, must have been 1998, 1999. So I spent 2 years there as a trainee vet nurse. So it was then when I got a real insight of the kind of specialised areas where they did a lot of work, like dermatology, oncology, cardiology. It was a very specialised practice that specialised in the individual areas. Um, I think at that stage is where I really developed my passion to try and get into vet nursing. Now, vet nursing wasn't a chosen field on the outset, to be honest. It was I really wanted to be a vet surgeon.
Mm.
But I realised with the qualifications and experience factored in and the sheer difficulties of getting into vet school, I felt going down the path of going into vet nursing was something I wanted to do. So I tried to find a practice that was willing to take me on as as a becoming a qualified vet nurse with a day release program. In other words, a placement centre.
Hmm.
So I managed to find a job in a charity practice. And once I've started there as a hospital assistant. Now, I had a fantastic boss when I first started there. He was very open-minded. He was always, how can I put it, thinking outside the box.
Hmm.
He wasn't, I felt that in my past history, there was a lot of people putting barriers in, in front of me. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. Um, oh, you're going to struggle with this. My boss at that time was very open-minded, and I think he was a bit ahead of his time, which is really why I managed to stay there for 21 years. So it was just there when I qualified in 2007 with a day release program at Moscow College again. And then in 2013, I think, at the top of my head, is when I went on to do the advanced diploma. So I managed to complete the advanced diploma in vet nursing, and then I went on to do a degree in clinical vet nursing, all at the same college. And this was all done at a charity practice as well. So it was really a fantastic achievement. In the latter years of while I was there, I went on to do a master's degree.
Hmm.
And that was in conjunction with a cooperation with the charity practice and also with Nottingham Vet School.
Hmm.
Now, it was specialised in looking at anaesthetic combinations. Now, the whole idea of the anaesthetic combination was to try and look at how we can reduce the recovery times using high volume nutrient. So, for example, when you're using the quad combination, it takes around 4 to 5 hours recovery time. But if you were going in to do a multi-cat household, trying to do a nutrient program of around 30 cats, you need something with a high volume turnover, but in a safe an appropriate way. So we managed to research an anaesthetic program where we can get that down to around 6 to 8 minutes recovery time. So my thesis was based on that, and it was really a fantastic achievement, especially for a deaf person entering that kind of field and developing oneself. It really is amazing achievement. It's something I'm very proud of, and it's something that I'd like to think the charity practice should be proud of too, that they've helped develop a deaf person become the best they can be. And I think by doing this, I want to get it out there that deaf people can do these things, and I'm proof of that. And there are appropriate ways of getting through these, overcoming these hurdles, and it can be done.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. And I think something that really kind of struck me when you were speaking, you talked about a person that you worked with who really believed in you, and kind of, I guess, helped to remove some of the barriers that existed. And so I wondered whether there were sort of other kind of people, or equally sort of other moments that you feel helped to set you on your path towards where you are now.
Yes, I think, if I'm honest, in the early years of my life, discrimination tended to be quite rife. Discrimination used to be prevalent and used to be quite open, to be honest with you. In the latter stages of the years, things have gotten better, but unfortunately, discrimination becomes hidden. So it's just still apparent, but it's not as open and apparent as it used to be. That's where the difficulties lie, and that's one of the problems that a disabled person is going to have. Now, there are support out there, and I've had some support from Access to Work. And in the latter stages, I've been involved with the British Veterinary Chronic Illness Support Group, in which I'm a part of the panel. Now, I'm very proactive and a positive person, and I'd like to think we need to educate people on what kind of support is out there and how you can absorb the reasonable adjustment and help them become the best they can be. All too often, there's barriers that are put in place. It doesn't need to be a barrier when a lot of the adjustment is quite minute and very subtle changes, and it can make a massive difference to the person entering practice. So yeah, like you say, the director that I worked for was fantastic and amazing, and I think he's worth every credit that I give him. I went on to be promoted to clinical manager, and I was leading a team of 18 nurses at one point. So and now I've gone on to emergency critical care now. So that's my field at the moment. But having said that, though, there are support out there, and I do know that there's a lot of initiatives in place now. For example, they've got disability confidence scheme, which employers can get themselves involved. I think some time ago it was used to be called the two ticks. What you used to see at the very bottom is where people get a guaranteed interview, and it used to be employer aware when it comes to disabled people. Now, disability confidence scheme is split into 3 sections. I've got it listed here. So the first is level 1, committed, level 2, employer, and level 3, leader. Now, I think it's a fantastic initiative, but I would like to see that it's not just become a label. And that's the thing that's very worrying, because I want to see this government scheme where it opens the doors up so that people like myself can apply for roles, and that they genuinely believe that they can take these people on. So it's a fantastic initiative, and it's out there. And I think there's an awful lot of work to be done in terms of developing this and fine-tuning to get the cooperation of employers. I know from retrospective, when it comes to vet schools and colleges, there are other support like disability student allowance.
Mm-hmm.
With something like that, is you can gain support in terms of financial support for note takers, interpreters, even equipment. If you need a computer, for note taking, for example, adapted stethoscopes. There's a huge range of equipment, so the support is there, whether it's financial or whether it's personal support. So you can get this from student services when it comes to education, or you can get it from Access to Work, which you can actually apply for online, actually, which is quite very easy to do. When I applied for Access to Work, one of the things I did get was a loop system, which is like a Roger pen.
Mm-hmm.
It helps with the communication support. I've also had sign language interpreters and lip speaking services, which has helped with the role that I was doing, especially when you're doing one-to-one or meetings.
Yeah.
One of the other things I've managed to get was adapted stethoscopes. Now, this is adaptable to hearing aids, or it can be done through a range of listening techniques. So it can be adapted to the Roger pen, which is a loop system, or you can have a headphones on, or you can have it directly connected to your hearing aids. So, and it's 100 times amplification, I believe.
Right.
And it's something that can be obtained through Access to Work or using the disabled student allowance. And it's a fantastic bit of kit. And I'm working with vets asking if they can borrow it. So it's absolutely amazing. It really is. It's really turned things around for me using this sort of equipment. So I strongly recommend anybody out there that's deaf or hard of hearing to be seriously considering getting something like that. It makes a world of difference.
So you've talked quite a bit about, I guess, some of the positive aspects of your journey so far. And you also talked a little bit about discrimination towards, people with disability, and also how that kind of can manifest as a sort of hidden discrimination. And I just wanted to kind of stay on that sort of subject for a bit, if that's okay. Um, and I wondered, sort of looking back at your journey through vet school, how did some of those things, like the discrimination, how did that sort of impact your journey? If you could talk a bit more about some of the barriers perhaps that you experienced initially.
I think when I was a lot younger, I think I refused to accept why I was treated differently. For example, I could never really understand why people weren't proactive and communicative and find me approachable, when I was a lot younger. And it was something that really hit me hard, in terms of confidence. And I'd even go as far as where it said it developed anxiety, in terms of being around certain people. And yeah, it did affect me in a big way. As I've gotten older, I think I've become to realise is that it's no fault of them. I think it's these very people that are not aware and they need to be educated. And this is why I strongly recommend having deaf awareness, which obviously can be paid through these initiatives. And I've had this deaf awareness programs in employment, in educational establishment, and it makes an enormous difference. And when deaf people have a speech impairment, they think it's actually connected to the way the thinking process works when they're two very different things. For example, somebody can't talk very well and they think they're not as intelligent as they think they are, or at least that's how I perceive it, which is a real shame because there are some clever people out there, deaf people that is. They may not be able to speak as clearly as someone out there would do, but I think education's key, and it's something that I've learned as I've gotten older. I've learned that not to be so defensive, but to educate and say, it's okay, I'm deaf, I appreciate if you can help me, look at me where so I can lip read you, there's no shame in doing something like that. And it was something that I couldn't do when I was younger, being proactive and say, I need help. Could you speak to me this way? Could you do it this particular technique? I wasn't very confident in being able to do that when I was younger, which is a shame, because I feel like I've missed out so much. The latter stages, in terms of discrimination, I've come across HR, various HRs, and they're not as educated as I thought they would be. I've come across one HR that said about the disability confidence scheme. One actually described it as disability competence scheme, which is disappointing, and it's a very, although in hindsight I realise it may have been a mistake on their part, but I find it quite insulting to be described it like that. But again, we're getting back down to education. It's having the key people in HR that fully understand what kind of people are working in that kind of field and establishment, getting the support out there, and I think the deaf people to progress in the vet schools or colleges, they need to have the right people in HR that's knowledgeable to be able to support them. And I think that's one of the most challenging things that I've seen to date. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that education has to continue on an ongoing basis. There isn't a sort of final destination for education. It's always going to be needed to help people become aware of what they don't know. So yeah, I think well done for being able to do that, as you sort of progressed through your journey.
Thank you.
Okay, so next question then. So how have you managed any challenges that you've experienced during your career? What do you think has helped to kind of get you through some of those kind of difficult times?
I think communication's key. I don't mean in terms of the barriers to communication. I mean it's open yourself up and say that these are the challenges and building that kind of relationship with your employer or with your line manager, or in the case of education establishment, with your tutor. It's building that kind of rapport and relationship and feeling comfortable of saying, I need help with this. Could you help me with this in this sense of direction? I need this equipment. It's been proactive, getting yourself out there and say what you need, and don't be afraid to say that you need help. I think if I could speak to my younger self, that's exactly what I would say.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And I guess kind of staying a little bit on that sort of subject, when you kind of reflect back on your career to date, what have been the sort of main factors you think that have contributed to your professional achievements? So I know you've spoken about some aspects already. You talked about, the director that you worked for. But is there anything else that you think, reflecting back, that has really helped?
I think probably sheer determination. I think it's made me stronger as a person with the challenges I've faced. and I don't like failure. So I see that every time I get put down, I come back tenfold. So I've never been a person that's stayed down when I've been kicked down. That's probably the best way I can describe it. You know, when I face barriers, I overcome them and I succeed. But that's through sheer determination because I refuse to give up. And I refuse to let the negative or the barriers get me down. And I think that's why I should give myself credit to get where I am today, because I like to think I can think outside the box. So if I can't do it this particular route, I start thinking, reassessing if there's another way around it, or if there's another route I can take to get to the same destination. So I've never took a step back and think, I can't do this. I can't achieve this. It's something I've never done, you know. So, and I have been on my knees and I've felt where it's been tough and it's been absolutely difficult getting to that place where I need to be. But with the right support and obviously sheer determination, and there have been some key people in my life where I can count upon, where they've really helped me get through to where I need to be. And it's without these people, I probably won't be where I am today. But the people that are watching this very thing will probably understand who they are. But yeah, I owe it to them to get where I am today.
Thank you. And the sheer determination that you spoke about, is that something that you have developed through adulthood, or were you also like that during your childhood as well?
I think I was like that when I was at a younger age. I think I've always been. I knew what I want. The minute I did the placement with the school, and I did 2-week placement in the local vet practice, I knew then that this is what I wanted to do.
Mm,
It hadn't been smooth sailing, and it hadn't been the standard route that most people would take. But the end result is where I wanted to be, and I'm really proud of myself that I've gotten to where I needed to be. And I've done some amazing things, you know. In the 20 years I've worked in practice, I've done some amazing projects, and I'm really proud of it. And I'd like to think I've contributed to so many things. And I know there's some vet nurses out there that are also deaf like myself, that are succeeding in the same kind of career pathway too. What I would like to see in the future is when we see congress like the BBA Congress, BBNA, BSABA, you know, there's a lot of congresses. I would like to see them be a bit more aware, you know, having loop systems, maybe having a sign language interpreters for keynote speakers, you know, things like this, because I am pretty sure that there's a large proportion of those, at least with hearing impairments.
mm,
So it's nice to be able to be more open and having that equal access to what
yeah.
these congresses should be. And I know in America, they're very in front when it comes to things like this. And I think the UK lags behind, which is a little bit of a shame. And also, I'd like to see that these webinars that you see on, I don't know, because of the result of COVID, you know, we're seeing a bit of a more of a shift of online learning.
Hmm.
And I would like to see a lot of this being captioned. It's quite very easy to do, you know, it's very easy to get this technology out there, but sadly, there's a big proportion of them are not captioned, which restricted my ability to get access to them, you know, and I have to use other technology combined. So it's really is a challenge in that respect. So that's what I'd like to see, you know, for the future.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you very much for that. Brilliant. Okay, so I guess kind of staying on that subject actually. So um again, sort of thinking back to when you were sort of going through vet school to where you are now, how do you feel the conversations about deafness in the vet profession have progressed, evolved? What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I wasn't always proactive about telling people that I was deaf. I was a very proud person when I was younger, and I wasn't very open to telling people that I am deaf, and I need support. So yes, I think having that level of communication has developed over the years, and I think we're seeing them more receptive to having that communication that you need to have. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah,
But
that makes
yeah,
sense. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you also mentioned as well about just some of the sort of congresses and webinars, and how, they're sort of lagging behind the US in terms of inclusivity. And I guess, these conversations like what we're having today, will help to kind of push that agenda as well. Because, the more we talk about these things, then of course, that can also spark sort of change and action, right?
yeah, I think that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see change for the better.
Yeah.
A classic example is the recent change in having GCSE in sign language implemented in schools. And that was only through campaigning and getting it in there so that children can develop that level of skill set at such an early age. And it's very important that they understand the key elements when they get into adulthood. For example, if you were if you was a vet and you knew limited sign language, it doesn't have to be extensive, just knowing the basics, and you had a deaf client coming in an emergency and it may require consent to have that patient put to sleep and
Hmm.
euthanized, sadly. You need to have that level of conversation so that that deaf person understands what they're signing. So I think it's absolutely important that deaf, veterinary surgeons are aware and having that level of knowledge. It doesn't have to be extensive, some basic sign language. It will make an enormous difference in terms of the emotional being of that client that comes in through them doors. That's just a typical example. And I think that's where we're headed, into the future, where more people are becoming aware. And I'm pleased to say that they're doing this at such a young age in schools, having that level of education before they get to that adulthood.
Mm.
So they come across in everyday life that there may be deaf people out there, whether it's deaf nurses, even vet surgeons, for example, and clients that may even pass through the doors, for example.
Great, thank you. And what type of reasonable adjustments should vet practices make for staff who are deaf?
Well, reasonable adjustments. I think there's a lot of things out there you can get through access to work. For example, loop systems. Now you can have mobile loop systems or you can have it built into the infrastructure. Now, I do realise that they can be quite expensive, and I know there's government funding out there,
Mm.
whether full funding or partially funded. It's usually depending on the circumstances. So that is definitely a big thing, really, and it's something that you could have available to clients as well. So it's not just for vet staff, but also for clients as well. So it can work both ways. There's also adapted telephones, which is like a minicom, which is a text relay system. So that's one of the adapted supporters out there that they can make phone calls to clients or to colleagues, perhaps. So that's one of the equipments available. And stethoscopes, which I mentioned before, you can get those. Um, One of the things that I would like to say is it's a deaf awareness, which is part of the reasonable adjustment. It's a subtle approach, but it will cover things like speaking face to face, so that you can get that lip reading contact, so you can understand what the other person's saying. And if you were talking, don't have your back to the window where there's a shadow where you can't actually see your face. Interpreter support, communicative support. So there's a huge range of reasonable adjustment that can implement in practice. And quite often, some of these are quite subtle, some quite small, slight changes that can make a big difference to the deaf person rather than the actual practice itself. And yeah, I think there's an awful lot that can be done.
And I would imagine that during the COVID pandemic, with people wearing face masks, that must have also presented a different type of challenge, right?
Yes, it was something that I had a massive challenge back in 2019 when the COVID became apparent, and everybody suddenly wear face mask. And I will say it actually brought me to my knees. It really did, both personally and professionally. I couldn't get access to my local GP for support. Everything was literally done online, video calls. And actually, when I went to the GP and I had to knock on the door and beg, that's how bad it was, because there was no actual access support. In terms of in practice, I had to wait 6 months for a clear face mask, despite repeatedly asking for one. So that was one of the challenges I had. For some people, a mask is just a mask.
Yeah.
For me, it's a complete barrier to the very key working principles of working in the practice, and it shut me off completely. And I had to ask people constantly to drop the mask so that they communicate with me. So you can imagine the kind of emotional impact it had on me. And I got very depressed, and I went through a very bad depression over it, because I felt it was a challenge having to constantly ask people to drop their mask, when they communicate with me. But at the same time, having respect, because they also need to protect themselves too. So it's a bit of a two-way street, really, because you've got the protection means, but it was a real difficult element of my life, and it's something that probably will never leave me. It's something that it took me a long time to get back on my feet. And it just, even to this day, actually scares me with the fact that they implement something like that again. But at the time, there was supply issues as well. So, well, that's just even with normal face mask. That's not just with the clear face mask. So, yeah, I think if anything, it would be useful to have some sort of contingency plan and some sort of stores where it can be released for those that really do need it.
Sure.
So I think I can probably say in hindsight, there's probably a lot of people hoarding these at the time. People were ordering them left, right and centre, bulk buying. Most practice was doing it, and it's made a really shortcoming in terms of supply as well. But equally, though, funding is an issue as well at the time, because people don't realise how immediate you need it. With something like that, it has an immediate impact on the very way you work. So it's something you need tomorrow, not 6 months down the line. So that was one of the challenges at the time. And I think if I can speak for a lot of deaf people that experience something like that. So I'm hoping that as we move forward, I think there'll always be an element, like you've said, that the COVID, I think there will always be some challenges before we'll be completely out of this situation. But I like to think that clear face masks become readily available if needed.
Sure.
Funded as well.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay, so what advice would you give to deaf students who are at an early stage of their journey through vet school?
I think one word: don't give up. That is probably what I would say. I think some people give up too easily, and I think sheer determination and thinking outside the box, there's always more than one way to achieve that destination where you need to be. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and also seek funding. There are initiatives out there that can help. And also, if you're unhappy in a practice or you're unhappy in a particular educational establishment, speak up. And if it still doesn't remain resolved, then you're in the wrong place. That's what I would say. I said it'll be at that point where you need to say to yourself, time to move on. There are some fantastic practices out there, and I've worked in a few of them, but there are some that still lag behind. But sometimes there's only so much you can do to educate these people, but there's sometimes when you've just simply got to move on. But I would say to these deaf people, get the equipment you need, get the support you need, and simply don't give up.
Cool. Thank you very much. And my last question for today. So reflecting now on everything that we've discussed, are there any kind of final sort of takeaway messages that you would like to leave, like in general?
I think probably to thank those that have helped me on my journey, you know, the key people that helped me to get me to where I need to be. And it's the very people that helped me with the initiatives, getting the funding, the support that's out there. I won't mention names, but they'll obviously know who I'm talking about. And I'd like to thank those that have helped me on my journey. And I'm hoping other people that do watch this will help others that need to get to where they need to be on their journey as well. There are help out there. You just need to do it the most appropriate way to achieve that objective.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Bertie. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you and to learn more about your experiences, your journey so far. Really, really fascinating. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Take care, Bertie.